Hello friends. Today we are going to discuss about serial killers, part 4, sexual homicide. I am Dr. Suresh Badadmat, professor of psychiatry, working at National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, Bangalore. In this video, I'll be discussing about sexual homicide, specifically concerned with two serial killers. Invariably, the sexual homicides involve humiliating the victim, mutilation of the body, and also dismemberment is common. I'll also be discussing about sexual homicide research with regard to the latest scientific development. Sexual homicide involves the combination of both the sexual assault and also murder, making it particularly a heinous and a serious crime. Sexual homicide refers to a criminal act in which an individual is killed as a result of sexual assault. In this case, the motive of the homicide is often sexual gratification or sadistic pleasure on the part of the perpetrators. It is important to note that sexual homicide across the world is considered a very serious offense, and invariably, the investigating agencies take it seriously and investigate the matter to find the culprit. And invariably, these sexual homicides are associated with humiliating the victim, mutilation of the body of the victim. The grave concern is due to the violence, harm, and trauma inflicted not only on the victim but also on the community at large. Invariably, sexual homicide and serial killers usually go hand in hand. A serial killer is an individual who has committed a series of two or more murders in a separate incident, typically involves some degree of psychological and emotional gratification. These murders are often committed over a period of time with a cooling off period between each crime. The best example for humiliation, mutilation, and dismemberment is Jeffrey Dahmer. He used to take young male kids and you wanted to make them his sexual slave. He wanted to have a complete power over his victims. He used to humiliate them, mutilate their bodies, keep those dismemberment body parts as a trophy to relive the whole situation again and again. Now let's understand, why do serial killers do humiliation, mutilation, and dismemberment of the body parts? Human mutilation is defined as the act of depriving an individual of a limb or other important parts of the body, or deprival of an organ or a severe disfigurement, and it covers the term dismemberment. Invariably, this type of mutilation, which is involved in a crime, is called as criminal mutilation. There are various types of criminal mutilation. Defensive, where the motive is to get rid of the body. For example, for a purpose of sexual gratification, a person may indulge or rape a woman. In this process, he may assault her and she may die. Now, to get rid of her body, he will cut her into pieces and throw in various places. Not only that, he would like to keep the victim's name, identity secret. Hence, this dismemberment and mutilation plays a crucial role. The second one is aggressive type, where the killing and mutilation is motivated by a severe anger either against the victim or else as a woman in general. Offensive. In this offensive type, where dismemberment is the actual purpose of the murder. Here, this cutting, mutilation of the body parts causes autoeroticism becoming aroused. They may even get orgasm, and many a time they do have sex with the dead bodies. That means offensive type revolves around lust, pleasure, and also it is considered as sadistic murders. The fourth one is necromantic mutilation. This is carried out on a dead body with the purpose of using some body part as a trophy, symbol, or fetish. Invariably, the criminal mutilation can be of two types: organized and disorganized. Organized, here it is plausible, for instance, where the dismemberment to represent an organized, well thought out, planned action following a homicide aimed at disappearing the evidences. A far cry from the picture of the frenzied, deranged offender senselessly butchering a victim. Here, in a disorganized type, it may also be unplanned, aggressive, and overkill to satisfy his aggression. So, you need to remember is an organized, it is a well planned, and they do it with a purpose. Disorganized is a situation where the person loses his anger, unable to think, and he commits a crime. Hence, organized and disorganized classification is there. Now, if you look at the various research, the majority of the cases of dismemberment, as many in one of the research done by C. and Beauregard in 2016 clearly said that out of 65, 47 were examined in Korea and found that defensive mutilation, that is, for the disappearance of the evidence, to remove the identity of the victim, they did this. The choice of this type of mutilation was mainly motivated need to remove the bodies from the homicide location. The location of the homicide either was the residence or at the victim's place. The crime that involves mutilation and dismemberment have occurred in a variety of contexts. It can be the reason of disposal of the body, sadistic act, ritual, and other scenarios. While it may feel natural or tempting to associate such a kind of criminal act of body mutilation to insanity or mental illness or psychopathy, but invariably they are not mentally ill. These are the people who act pre-planned. They know the consequences of the act. They know that they are doing something against the law and it is not to be done. The mutilation of the dead body has become more common in recent times. Although it is unusual and rare, for the sake of disposing of the body, mutilation in metropolitan cities is becoming a common event. In majority of the cases, invariably, the head and the fingers are removed for the purpose of removing the victim's identity. Either they use arson to invariably by using acid, or may be burning the face and also the fingerprint so that the identity of the victim cannot be done. In a recent research done by Patricia and his colleagues in 2020, published in a Journal of Forensic Sciences, the title of the paper was Dismemberment and Mutilation, a data-driven exploration of patterns, motives, and styles. This publication was done in 2020. They considered to look into the data of the 350 serial killers which occurred between 1950 onwards. In this 350 serial killers, they randomly chose 100 for detailed analysis. Invariably, they classified the mutilation and dismemberment into four types: defensive for the purpose of disposing of the body, aggressive, it is for anger, offensive is for pleasurable, necromaniac is severe a body part to retain as a trophy, prize, or a symbol, or even incorporating a sexual act to associate with that. The results were stunning. 60% was defensive, that is for the disposing of the body. 26 were offensive. It is because of anger. Aggressive was only 14%. If you look at the motives, that is the murder and dismemberment or mutilation, if you look at this table clearly, invariably, the motive is the dismemberment was 53%, sexual was 20%, and emotional anger was 12%. The motive is very clear. Majority of them is for disposing the body. That is the reason, that is the practical. The second one was sexual, that is 20%. That is becoming aroused by cutting the body parts. The anger was only 12%. Mental health reasons, that is a person with mental illness doing, is very, very less. It is hardly 2.7%. Hence, if a person is mutilating the body, don't think that he is mentally ill. He is a psychopath. He gains pleasure by sadistic behavior, or else he is a planned psychopath who wants to dispose of the body. If you look at this clear-cut chart, it clearly says the mutilation can be done by three types. One is who are planned, organized groups, especially underworld, gangs, or a religious, ideological fanatics or terrorists do this. Co-defendants are the person who is helping the serial killer or the sexual homicide, helping to dispose of the body. If you take the individuals, it has been classified into organized and disorganized. In organized, you can see the defensive and offensive and mixed motive. Disorganized is invariably aggressive type. In aggressive type, usually either that is a mental illness or a rage because of the revenge. Desexualization, dehumanization, and prejudice are well known. As you see, the organized, it is invariably because of either for the dispose of the body or else purpose of the sexual pleasure. Many a time it can be mixed methods. Now let's understand the sexual homicide research. What does it say? Although sexual homicide is a rare to the non-sexual homicide, if you look at the prevalence in United Kingdom, 6% of all murders and manslaughters, if you compare, it is very less. It is only 6%. In Canada, only 4% of all the murders and manslaughter. In United States, is 1% of all murder and manslaughters are sexual homicide. That means they have not crossed the dual digit. That is, they are hardly 1 to 6%. There was an interesting study done by Chopin and Biogard in 2019. This article was published in Current Psychiatric Research, and the title of the study was Sexual Homicide, a Criminological Perspective. Here, the researchers did a selective review representing the recent finding focusing on the sexual homicide. They had an important objectives. One of the first one was whether the international comparative studies of the victim, offenders, and the crime characteristics of sexual homicide were compared across the countries. They also tried to explore the link between sexual homicide, psychopathy, and sadism, and finally, finding on the spatial behavior and factors, whether the perpetrator did the crime in the known geographical area where he is well known, or crossing the jurisdiction from one police station to other, or maybe crossing from one state to another. The international comparison of studies showed that sexual homicide presents more similarity than differences across countries and culture. The minor differences observed were due to culture and contextual factors. That means the motive, the reason, the modus of operandi are similar across the countries. Sexual homicide offenders are a different types of offender compared to violent criminals who do not involve in sexual activity with the victim. That means this can be considered these are different types of people. Hence, a different types of rehabilitation has to be done. Doing the same rehabilitation plans may not work. Further, before you give parole, we need to think 100 times. Sexual homicide offenders are characterized by psychopathy, paraphilia, and childhood abuse. Sexual homicide serial offenders follow classical predatory behavior, target the victim, use this victim, use them for sexual gratification, mutilate them, and dispose the body. In sexual homicide, strangulation has been repeatedly found to be significantly associated with this type of crime. The sexual homicide focused on slow strangulation of the victim, and the perpetrator enjoys seeing the victim slowly dying. That is, he enjoys the suffering of the victim. The classical sadism is seen. Here, the perpetrator wants to have a complete control over the victim's life and the body. That is the dominance he wants to see and enjoy that. Invariably, looking at the spatial movement of the perpetrator, invariably there are various studies done, and one of the important terminology which came up was crime triangle mobility. This is analysis of the distance between the offender's residence, the victim residence, and the crime location. If you are able to plot these three places and see where the crime has occurred, that is the triangle mobility, and see how the perpetrator is within the same locality or moving from one locality to other locality and trying to evade the investigating agency. Sexual homicide research indicated a different modus of operandi. Especially, some of the perpetrators used to live near the victim's house and they target the victim, that is farming. Hunting. Here, this is a predatory method. Invariably, the perpetrator goes for hunting, chooses the victim's house away from his residence. Trapping. Here, the victim travels into the offender's neighborhood. That means a new person has come to the offender's neighborhood and uses this opportunity to trap them, use them for his sexual gratification, and dispose their body. Picking. Here, the perpetrator goes in search of the victim's house, and finding that they are alone, in that situation, he takes the advantage. There was an important research done by Hicks and his colleagues in 2015. This article was published in Sexual Abuse, a Journal of Research and Treatment in 2015. The title of the study was Towards Identification of the Sexual Killer, a comparison of sexual killers engaging in post-mortem sexual interference and non-homicidal sexual aggressors. These are the two people they compared and see and examined whether they differ. If you look at this table, in 48 cases, they found how much the post-mortem interference was there. Invariably, the method of killing was strangulation, either manual or by using ligature. Manual is by hands, ligature by using various types of ropes and methodology. Invariably, it is around 75%. If you look at the post-mortem interference, sex with the dead body was invariably 81%, and mutilation of the body was 21%. This clearly indicates sexual homicide are a different breed of criminals, and they need to be investigated, and the rehabilitation should be different. Hence, if you look at the way the process of committing crime, especially in sexual homicide, starts with premeditation. A complete planning will be done by the psychopaths. They select their victim. They kidnap and confine those victims. They physically restrain the victims. They will start humiliating them, inflicting pain, mutilating the bodies, and they do it in a specific ritualistic manner. Sometimes they use the weapons. They call that as serial killer's toolkit. And these same tools will be used invariably across all victims. And you can see the time spent by the perpetrator with the victim will be more than 1 hour. They would like to enjoy having the victim under their control, and invariably they would like to inflict injuries, see how they suffer, enjoy that suffering. To conclude, mutilation of the body parts, especially in sexual homicide, is seen in 60% for the purpose of defensive, that is, disposing of the body. In 25%, it is offensive, that is, for the lust, pleasure, or sadism. Sexual homicide offenders are characterized by psychopathy, paraphilia, that is, sadism, and childhood abuse. Sexual homicide and serial offenders follow a classical predatory behavior, whereas others use it as an opportunistic crime. Mutilation, humiliation are the characteristic of sexual homicide. These are the important points you need to know when you are investigating the serial killers who are doing sexual homicide. Thank you very much for giving your valuable time. Stay safe.